You're not going to believe what Morgan Freeman did in a grocery store in Savannah. Yeah, that Morgan Freeman, the voice of God, the wise soul of Hollywood, just standing in the produce aisle when something ugly caught his ear. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a scene. It was a moment so small, most people would have ignored it. But not him. A woman's voice, soft, warm, with a gentle Spanish accent, says, "Thank you. Have a blessed day." And then, snickering. Two young customers laugh under their breath. One of them loudly mocks her accent. Can't they hire people who speak American around here? Now, here's where it gets real. This wasn't just some stranger. This was Maria Alvarez, a 53-year-old cashier who's been working double shifts to raise her grandkids. She kept smiling, but you could see it in her eyes. Something cracked. And Morgan Freeman? He was standing just 2 lanes away, baseball cap, sunglasses on. And what he did next? It didn't just stop the mockery, it changed Maria's entire life. Stick with me, because what happens next will restore your faith in what real dignity looks like. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in Savannah, Georgia. Clouds hung low, the kind of weather where people just want to get in and out of the grocery store. Inside the Piggly Wiggly on East Victory Drive, the checkout lanes were steady but calm. No rush, no fuss. Lane 3 belonged to Maria Alvarez. She had her brown hair pinned neatly back, her name tag just slightly askew from the morning rush. Maria greeted every customer the same way, with a quiet warmth and a soft Spanish accent that wrapped around her words like a hug. "Hello there. How are you today? Would you like your milk in a bag? Have a blessed day." Most people didn't notice, but Maria noticed everything, especially the way some customers paused when she spoke, a flash of confusion, a smirk, a condescending nod. You see, Maria wasn't just a cashier, she was a fighter. Moved here from Honduras 15 years ago after losing her husband. Now she works double shifts to raise her 2 grandchildren, Amelia and Thomas, because their mother, her daughter, is in and out of rehab. Maria's life is built on holding everything together. Silently. That's when they walked in. 2 young women, maybe early 20s, designer bags, lattes in hand, scanning the aisle like it was a catwalk. Maria smiled, like she always does. "Hello there, find everything okay?" One of them whispered to the other, just loud enough. "Is it just me, or is she speaking in subtitles?" They laughed. Not the kind of laugh you share, the kind that cuts. Maria's hand paused over the scanner, just for a second, but then she kept going. Smile still there, voice still steady, but her eyes weren't smiling anymore. And standing 2 lanes over was a man in a Navy windbreaker and a Braves cap. He was buying frozen peas, orange juice, and a box of oatmeal. But what he was really buying that day was a moment, and that man was Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman hadn't planned to stop at that grocery store. He was in Savannah scouting locations for a voiceover project, taking a quiet break from the chaos of film sets. He liked places where no one noticed him. But that afternoon, under fluorescent lights and the soft beep of checkout scanners, something shifted. He'd heard the first comment. It stung, but he waited. He's been around long enough to know when a moment is just stupid, and when it turns cruel. The girls didn't stop. One of them waved a hand, exaggerated, mocking Maria's pronunciation. "Yo gracias," she said in a cartoonish tone. They giggled again, right in front of her, and here's the part that hurts. No one else said a thing. The man in line behind them stared at his phone. A woman with a toddler shuffled her kid away quietly. Even the store manager, Doug, a guy who usually jokes with Maria, just ducked behind a display of cereal. Maria stood still, scanning a can of beans with shaky hands. She whispered, "Have a blessed day," barely audible now. And that's when Morgan moved. He didn't make a scene, didn't shout. He just stepped out of his line and started walking toward lane 3-. Slow, steady, deliberate, heads turned. It was like the air itself changed. People started whispering, "Wait, is that Morgan Freeman?" But Freeman didn't care who saw him. He only cared about what he heard. And as he reached the counter, he gently placed his groceries in front of Maria, then looked the 2 girls in the eyes and said, "Not yet." Because that moment, the one where the whole store stopped breathing, That comes next. You could have heard a pin drop. Morgan Freeman stood at the checkout, one hand resting gently on the counter, the other still holding his wallet. His gaze was calm, but firm. Not angry, not dramatic, just truthful. He looked at Maria first. She was frozen, like her brain couldn't quite register what was happening. Was it really him? Him? The man whose voice narrated 1,000 stories was now standing in hers, and then, with that unmistakable calm, velvet voice, he said, "This woman," he nodded toward Maria, "speaks better than anyone in this room because she speaks with dignity." The store fell into stunned silence. Maria's lip trembled. Her fingers stopped scanning. The two girls looked like they wanted to shrink into their designer shoes. Morgan turned, slowly, to face them. And here's the thing about Freeman. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He commands silence just by showing up in it. "That accent you mocked," he said. "It's the sound of someone who left everything behind to build something better. It's the voice of sacrifice, hard work, love. And you thought it was funny." One of the girls tried to scoff, but it died in her throat. Morgan wasn't done. "She's not just a cashier. She's a grandmother, a protector, a survivor." He took a breath, looked back at Maria, then back at the crowd. "And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's not her voice that's the problem." Boom. And with that, the atmosphere cracked wide open. You ever seen a moment where time seems to freeze and then explode? That's what happened. For a full 2 seconds after Morgan Freeman finished speaking, nothing. No one moved. No one breathed. And then, applause. Not thunderous, not forced, but real. The kind of slow, respectful clapping that starts from a single pair of hands and spreads. The woman with the toddler? She nodded, tears in her eyes, and clapped. The guy with the phone? Lowered it, clapped. Even Doug, the manager who had been hiding behind the Cheerios, stepped forward, face red with guilt, and joined in. The two girls? They stared at the floor. Their smirks were gone. One of them mumbled something like, "Sorry," but no one was really listening anymore. They gathered their groceries and left quickly, with no parting words. And Maria? She just stood there, hands trembling, mouth slightly open. She looked at Morgan like he was a painting come to life, like he'd stepped out of a screen just to see her. She whispered, "Thank you," barely getting the words out through the lump in her throat. Morgan smiled, warm and wide. He leaned in just a little and said, "Don't thank me. You're the one who shows up every day with kindness. That's real courage." Maria wiped her eyes, finally breaking into a smile, a real one this time. And the whole store, felt different. Like someone had hit reset. Like dignity had just walked through the door in a Braves cap and sunglasses. As the applause faded and the store returned to its usual rhythm, something quiet, something beautiful happened. Morgan Freeman didn't just walk away. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. No markings, no label, just neatly sealed. He handed it to Maria, right there at the counter. She looked confused, hesitant. He smiled and said almost playfully, "For your grandchildren. Tell them to dream big." And then, he was gone. No photo ops, no autograph signing. He didn't wait for gratitude, just nodded, took his oatmeal and orange juice, and strolled out the door like it was just another Tuesday. Maria stood there holding the envelope like it was glass. Doug, the manager, finally found his voice. "Maria, do you want to take a break?" She shook her head. "No," she said, I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. She was changed. She finished her shift. Every thank you after that carried more strength than the one before. Because someone had seen her. Someone had heard her. And what was inside that envelope? That comes next. It wasn't until hours later, after the last customer had gone home and the store lights dimmed, that Maria finally sat down in the break room. The envelope was still in her apron pocket, unopened, untouched, like it might disappear if she looked too closely. Her hands were still shaking. She peeled the flap open slowly, carefully, like it was a sacred letter. And inside, two things. First, a cashier's check. $10,000, made out to Maria Alvarez Grandchildren's Fund. $10,000. Maria gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. Her eyes filled instantly, tears spilling down her cheeks before she could even process what she was holding. But it was the second item that shattered her. A handwritten note, simple, black ink on a folded card, no flourish, no signature. Just one line. From one narrator of life to another, thank you for your story. She read it again and again. That was the moment it hit her. He saw her. Not just the cashier, not just the immigrant. He saw the story she was living. Her struggles, her sacrifices, her strength. This wasn't charity. It was acknowledgement. Outside, the parking lot was quiet. Inside, Maria wept into her hands. Tears of relief, of pride, of release. Because for the first time in a long time, someone powerful didn't speak over her. He spoke for her. The next morning, something strange happened. Maria arrived at work and noticed people looking at her differently. Not in pity, not in curiosity, in respect. Doug, the manager who'd hidden behind the cereal display, he met her at the door, held it open, said, "I should have stepped in yesterday. I'm sorry, Maria." She smiled, nodded. But it didn't stop there. Customers she barely knew started calling her by name. "I saw that story online. You were so brave." "My grandmother had an accent too. Thank you for reminding me what matters." Because, yep, someone had filmed it. Just a few seconds. Morgan Freeman at checkout, standing up for a woman no one else saw. And it went everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook. The video exploded overnight. People weren't just watching a celebrity moment. They were witnessing something we all needed. Kindness, courage, recognition. For a few minutes on the internet, the world wasn't about division or outrage. It was about humanity. Maria's inbox flooded. A local radio show invited her to speak. A nearby college emailed asking if her grandchildren had applied for their scholarship program. This story, her story, was spreading. And all because one man decided not to stay silent. Let's be honest, Morgan Freeman didn't solve poverty that day. He didn't fix immigration or heal broken families or change the whole system, but he did something else. Something most people never do. He saw someone who was being humiliated, and he didn't look away. He used his presence, his voice, his platform, not to elevate himself, but to lift someone else. Because here's the truth. Most people would have done nothing, would have pretended they didn't hear it, would have gone home and maybe told their spouse what they saw. Not Morgan. He acted. And that act, the way he defended Maria's voice, her value, was a kind of quiet revolution. He didn't turn it into a speech about politics, didn't make it about race or class or celebrity. He made it about dignity, and in doing so, he reminded all of us of something that gets lost in the noise. That decency doesn't need an audience. Courage doesn't require a camera. And kindness? Kindness can echo for generations. Maria didn't just leave with an envelope, she left with her worth restored. And that is worth more than any check. Later that week, Maria sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, the envelope lying between her and two curious, wide-eyed faces. Amelia, age 11, and Thomas, age 9. She hadn't told them yet. She wanted to wait until they were home from school when their little world was calm and still. "Abuela," Amelia asked, "why are you smiling like that?" Maria smiled even wider. She pushed the envelope forward. "Open it," she said softly. The kids carefully peeled it open, just like she had. First, they saw the check. Their jaws dropped. "Wait, this is real money?" Thomas whispered. Maria nodded. "Money for you. For your future." Amelia held the note next. She read it out loud, stumbling just a little. "From one narrator of life to another, thank you for your story." "What's a narrator?" Tomas asked. Maria chuckled. "It means someone who tells stories." "But you don't tell stories," he said. And that's when she looked him right in the eyes. "Oh, mijo, every time I get up and go to work, every time I help you with homework, every time I speak with my accent and don't let it make me small, I am telling a story." Amelia blinked hard. "Was this from that man? The famous one?" Maria smiled. "Yes, and he saw me." And right there, at that kitchen table, something shifted in those children. They didn't just see their grandmother as someone who made sandwiches and packed lunches. They saw her as a warrior, a storyteller, a woman whose story was powerful enough to reach Morgan Freeman. The story didn't stop at the checkout counter. It didn't end at the envelope. It began there. A week after the incident, Maria was invited to speak at a community event hosted by a local cultural center. Nothing huge, just folding chairs, homemade snacks, and a handful of people from the neighborhood. She almost said no. She hated public speaking. But Amelia looked up at her that morning and said, "Abuela, tell your story. They need to hear it." So Maria put on her best blouse, brushed her hair back, and stood behind a small wooden podium. Her voice, still accented, still soft, but now unapologetic. She told them about coming to America, about her daughter's struggles, about raising grandkids, learning English late in life, and working shifts that ended with sore feet and missed birthdays. She told them about the girls in the grocery line, and then she told them about him. Morgan Freeman, and the man who stood up, not because he had to, but because it was right. When she finished, the room was silent, and then slowly, just like in the grocery store, applause. One woman in the back stood and said, "I never speak up either, but you just gave me permission." That night, Maria didn't go home feeling tired. She went home feeling heard. And that, maybe more than the check, more than the applause, was the gift Freeman gave her. Not just his voice, but the courage to use her own. Maria's story didn't just stay local. Soon it was featured on a national morning show. A clip of her speech at the Cultural Center went viral. Not because it was flashy, but because it was real, raw, unfiltered, and honest in a way that cut through the noise. News anchors called her the quiet cashier who reminded America what grace sounds like. But something even bigger happened. Letters started arriving at the grocery store. Dozens, then hundreds. One came from a woman in Nebraska who wrote, "I've been ashamed of my accent for 30 years. After hearing you, I spoke at my son's school in Spanish for the first time." Another from a man in Minnesota, "My mother was mocked for how she spoke English. I never defended her. I will now." Even school teachers began using her story in classrooms to talk about kindness, respect, and standing up for others. Maria wasn't just a story now. She was a symbol, proof that one act, one voice can spark 100 more. And Morgan Freeman, he didn't issue a statement, didn't post on social media. He didn't have to. He'd already said what mattered. This woman speaks better than anyone in this room because she speaks with dignity. And those words kept echoing far beyond the walls of that grocery store. In a world that often celebrates volume over value, where the loudest voices win the room, Maria's story hit differently. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. It wasn't a carefully curated viral stunt. It was truth caught in the wild. Think about it. We've all seen injustice, heard something cruel, watched someone shrink while others laughed, and most of us say nothing. Not because we're bad, but because it's easier. Easier to scroll, to avoid, to pretend it's not our business. But Morgan Freeman didn't do easy. He chose difficult. He chose the uncomfortable path, the one that risks judgment, that demands presence, that costs something. And because of that, a 53-year-old grandmother now holds her head higher. 2 children believe their future matters. And thousands of strangers remember, silence protects no one. Courage does. What happened in that checkout line wasn't just a celebrity moment. It was a masterclass in how to live with integrity. And here's the kicker. It didn't take a stage. It didn't take a script. It just took one man and one voice that refused to stay silent. A few weeks later, Maria returned to work after a short break. Same name tag, same warm smile, but something was different. Now people didn't just see a cashier. They saw a woman who had stood in the fire and walked out stronger. And the beauty of it all? She never raised her voice. She didn't need to, because real strength, true grace, it's quiet. Maria eventually framed the note Morgan left her. It hangs in her kitchen right next to a photo of Amelia and Thomas at their school's Career Dreams board. Thomas had written architect. Amelia wrote poet. When asked why, she said, "Because my abuela taught me that stories can change everything." And that's it. Not a Hollywood ending. Not a fairy tale. Just a real woman, a real act of kindness, and a ripple that's still moving, quietly, powerfully, into places we'll never see. Because when someone with a platform uses it to protect, not promote, it changes the air in the room. And sometimes, it changes lives. So what do we take away from all this? Is it that Morgan Freeman is a good man? Sure, but it's bigger than that. It's about the moment. The moment you hear cruelty, and you choose not to let it pass. The moment you see someone shrinking, and you remind them of their worth. The moment you realize your voice, yes, even yours, can protect someone else's. Maria's accent didn't change. Her hours didn't magically get easier. Her life is still full of hard days, aching feet, and stretch-the-budget dinners. But now, when she speaks, she knows her voice matters. And because one man reminded her of that truth, a grocery store became a sanctuary. A grandmother became a storyteller, and a world that often forgets kindness remembered it, if only for a moment. So next time you hear someone being mocked, next time you witness small cruelty dressed as a joke, ask yourself, what would happen if you stepped in? Because one sentence, said with dignity, can echo for generations, just like his did. If Morgan Freeman's words moved you, help someone else hear them. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that remind us what courage looks like when it whispers, not shouts.